Okay, let's talk about it right now because that's what my question anyway. Because it's probably the juiciest source of Ottoman lore in the Balkans are the
Yes,
Janissaries, or as we call
yes.
them, Yanichari back home. We were
Yanich,
told that these young kids were mostly from the Balkans, but probably not. Were taken at a young age, raised as Muslim, and then turned into these elite infantry soldiers. In our stories, they were always soldiers, not administrators.
yes.
And these fantastic stories usually convey a mix of fear, in a modern sense, of kids being taken from their parents, but also pride because they became somebody in the
Yes.
empire, right? The
So that,
classic arc is then, of course, some Serbian janissary who would then become the Grand Vizier.
yes.
What was the reality, though?
So
You
that
talked
is
about it a little bit already.
that is not too far off. And what I mean by this is that, but you collect like thousands of children. How many of them will become viziers? Let's just So yes, absolutely. For a period, most of the viziers were initially like from, let's say, Constantinople on, like from the conquest of Constantinople on. The viziers are majority Muslim Christian converts. But as initially they're as adults. What I mean by this is that they're Byzantine, ex-Byzantine or ex-Serbian lords that are brought in. They convert. Usually, you can tell from their name, because they would have to, like, their first name becomes Mehmet, but their last name would be Angelovich, like, so it's not, but and they don't lose their ties, of course, to where they came from. In fact, their ties are strengthened. That is part of the reason they would bring them into the central administration. Later on, a lot of these people that would rise through the ranks would be children, but that would take time. So they would come in as, what does that mean? 13, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, that kind of thing. And then you try and figure out, they are converted, and then you teach them, you put them through the education system of the court. So they learn Turkish, obviously Persian, because that is the language of it's for a while it was the language of administration. But then it becomes the language of literature and poetry. So if you're a Renaissance man, no pun intended, you would have to have Persian and Arabic for legal, if you're going to go into law, right? So they would, and then you would train them in military, like, so they would be, and then you would split the very few that end up being Janissaries, Yeniçeri. So Janissaries in English, Yeniçeri is the right word to hit, which means the new army, or so they are the ones that are the elite,
The
trained,
top of the
the top
class.
of the top. Yeah,
The
I think
Harvard of,
they're
the
the Harvard.
Cornell of that time.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So they are and they are the ones that you only send in at the end. Still, there was no such thing as a standing army for a long time. When there was standing armies, trained armies, that becomes that's when the Ottomans start to lose their military power. Because for them, they would call on some of their what do you call it? A lot of their armies would have different. They would send them to different kind of villages where they would not rule. They would use the resources from the village, and then they're supposed to be called on by the central government when we're going into battle, and they'd bring in men with pitchforks, and so so they're just fodder that you would actually use as fighters. Janissaries are trained elite people you bring in at the end to finish things off. But the Janissaries, out of all of the Devshirme, which is the system of collecting, that's what they call them, like the harvesting. Only if you become Janissaries, the rest populate the administration. So they are the accountants and the lawyers and the religious figures and people that work in the court, people that are very close to the Sultan. Some of them work in his internal chamber, so they wash him and bathe him and all that. So and all this, you basically, somebody is in charge of them as they grow up, and you figure out what is their strength. Are they more like physical? Is it mental? Is it something else? So they get divided up. But that means a lot of the rank and file are actually mostly Balkan. So that is absolutely true. Mostly Balkan. You usually go, I mean, Serbia has a disproportionate number from them, but Montenegro also as a Montenegrin, because they had this image that Montenegrins are big and broad and sturdy. They're mountain men.
Yeah, we still have that image in the Balkans, to be honest.
Right, right. So there is so that is common. Now, the whole thing with the Shirme really ends towards the end of the 17th century. By the beginning of the 18th century, it's gone. It cannot be justified. And also remember, there's no conquest happening after that, where the borders are established. So what are you going to go to your Ottoman villages that happen to be in it and collect kids? So that whole system falls apart. Also, the system is so strict that the Janissaries they can get married, but their privilege does not go to their kids.
Okay.
Right.
So it's not just like a feudal lord who would just pass, or
no, nothing like that at all. They also get paid in salary. So whether
like professionals,
they're professionals. But later on, all of that falls apart for many reasons. Economic is one of them. Also, the devaluation of the currency. They're paid in coin that gets devaluated when the silver comes from the New World. There's so many complex that whole eliteness of the Janissaries that lasted for about 200 years really deteriorates very quickly. And then but they have established themselves now. They've changed the rules for themselves. There's so many of them that they become kind of enemy of the state, if you will. They're competing with the Sultan's authority. Imagine, like, it's a whole other thing. And it takes about 100 years to get rid of them completely, finally, with this like red wedding event in which, they love
the reference.
They get rid of a whole bunch of them which only happens really in 1820.
Okay.